I guess on Latin, like what do you think about the sort of fixation people have on classical Latin?
I think it's sad. I think it's impoverished. I mean, it's so limited compared to everything that Latin is, to focus on just one aspect of it that's, however, original or glorious or, and the, primacy it might have, it's still only part of it. And, I just, for me personally, precisely because I've gone through so many, got such a, you helped me organize it. I've got such a big collection of Latin didactic materials, and so many Latin didactic materials sort of want to dangle Catullus or some Horace in front of your nose like a carrot, and they give you these poems like long before you're able to read them, and it's supposed to whet your appetite for them, but it killed my appetite for them. I don't really enjoy golden age or silver age poetry compared to medieval scholastic philosophy or hymns. I mean, I just there's so much in terms of, again, wanting to think in the language. If you read the Orbis Pictus of Comenius, in terms of building your vocabulary across everything you could possibly get. I mean, there's just so much vocabulary that comes in the 12th century, in the 16th century, and into now. If you want to make Latin be a language that is dealing with the vocabulary of the contemporary world, the document, the dictionary for that is being composed in the Vatican. You can't get away from thinking in the language and the different stages of it, and just only wanting to stay in that period, of I want to speak like Caesar spoke. I just, Caesar spoke that way, but Augustine didn't speak that way, and Charlemagne didn't speak that way, and Aquinas didn't speak that way, and Descartes didn't speak that way, and Leibniz didn't speak that way, and Comenius didn't speak that way, and there's, I forget his name now, but there's a guy in the late 19th, early 20th century, AA, also like me, but sort of said he was like claimed to be the last Latin speaking. Translated all sorts of detective novels and stuff like that into Latin in the early 20th century. And I don't know why it's so popular just to translate children's books like Winnie the Pooh and Harry Potter and stuff. But if you dig deeper, like I said, you find entire translations of Don Quixote and Njál's Saga and all sorts of things into Latin. And it'd be interesting to read again the original compositions, particularly of the medieval scholastic philosophers and people like that. But yeah.
Yeah, would you consider making like just lists of these things on the website? Because I imagine people like they want to read Latin, but they people only really talk about like the classical authors.
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Then I guess also, since you're talking about like the Latin, like sort of I guess you more than most people are very aware of like the way languages sort of shift over time, but there's also that continuity within that. And you were talking about like sort of the philosophy of what language is. I'm sort of wondering like what are like the big discoveries you feel that you've made about that?
I wouldn't encourage them in terms of big discoveries. It's like deeper and deeper insight more than big discoveries. It's like, oh, nobody knew this, and now I discovered something. I'm the only one. No. But it's more, just realizing how, in a certain sense, particularly like with when you have enough knowledge, when you have enough pattern practice, when you have enough sort of precedent already, particularly when it comes to, say, a branch language, at a certain point, you don't need to learn new stuff anymore. You need to feel your way how the stuff you know already should be molded or changed to fit into these circumstances. It's like each language is a sort of a frequency or a vibration range, and it has a certain musicality to it. And if you can somehow make that musicality, if you can get on that frequency or that vibration and have that be what you're communicating in, and you know how to communicate, okay, then you're speaking that language. And that can happen very quickly with branch languages, where again you have enough sort of overall knowledge of how they're, you know, structured and how they work, and the other the words that they might be, and how those words would probably sound in that language, and feeling your way into it, and you know, and yes, needing to practice and needing to get better and needing to polish and needing to get corrected, but in a very large sense, being able to say, you know, I really, I still know far less than I ever hoped to know, and you can never know enough, but I know more than I think I do. I know more than I thought I did. I know I'm able to sort of access things that I didn't know that I knew, so that's kind of interesting.
And on a different note, like I know most of your sort of language learning has been autodidactic.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think is the role of like having a teacher in these things? Like, is there value in it, or does it sort of taper off after a while?
A good teacher is a great thing to have. If you have a good teacher, that's wonderful. At different stages, different things. I mean, if your initial foray into language learning, I think it's very important to have a good teacher who can not just teach the language, but teach you how to learn the language. At a certain pace though, when you've gone beyond sort of at a certain point, you do know how to learn the language, I think, and then a teacher, if you're in sort of a learning situation with other people, then that can hold you back. So if a good teacher can help you learn how to learn, and then you can concentrate on learning on your own, I think you can learn much. But then once you're learning on your own, inevitably you're going to come up across some things that you you can't understand, you can't grasp. And having somebody that you can ask who can explain to them, that's wonderful. So I think maybe the first role of a teacher would be to show you how to learn, and the second role would be to, you know, to sort of answer questions that you can't answer, sort of go over things, help you drill, help you through things, and then ultimately, when you really want to get good at a language, then that's the stage when you have to seek out a certain kind of teacher, the specific kind of teacher that you need for the specific thing that you're looking at, be it accent reduction, you know, better pronunciation, or cultural information or something like that. You need to seek out a teacher, and then working one-on-one when you're sort of at a high intermediate level, you know, to find somebody who can really sort of push you over the next level and help you and improve on things. So there's always a room for teachers. I mean, I've always wanted to help people learn how to teach themselves languages themselves, and imagine that then, you know, you could just sort of step back. But again, that secondary role of people needing somebody to you know, have somebody to answer and ask things. So that's one thing that we've seen at in the academy, the sort of evolution of the guided self-study. That was not my idea. That's organic. That came from the people that we have. It was like Steve asking for Sanskrit and other people wanting things here. And so I said, well, I don't want to, like, you know, teach you with the textbook, but what we can do is, you know, you'll go as a group and you'll work on this, and then we'll come together and we'll review it, and we'll see if you have any questions, and, you know, if there's exercises, we'll go over them, and I'll, you know, correct those, but you're responsible for the learning. And that sort of model, even though we have a lot of people that have been autodidactic learners and have worked on their own, they're the ones that are driving this and saying, yeah, that accountability, that, you know, doing this, and, you know, everybody is teaching himself, but other people are doing it at the same time, and then we can come together and practice, and then we can come together and meet me and get corrected and make sure we're sort of going the right path. So
then it sounds like also community is a big part of what the academy offers.
So I wouldn't want to say surprisingly, but that was not what I imagined. But yes, absolutely, that is something that's very important. I think just like with the Polyglot Conference, say, before it, you know, where you would go to a place like that, and even if you're kind of a shy person like I am, and you don't like being in crowds, just, you know, being in this big gathering of hundreds of other people who share your interests, which until now you've always felt, you know, marginalized and nobody cared, and, you know, and people actually put down or made fun of your interests in something scholarly like language learning, and now everybody has the same interest. That's a great feeling. But yeah, going beyond it, yeah, just yeah, the feeling, the camaraderie, the being together in this guided self-learning circles and other things. I would say that is a big important part of the academy for many people. I mean, I encourage that particularly for the guided learning language, that the people should get together on their own at least once a week to go over and do stuff. But I think people have formed all sorts of other groups and talk and share things, and, you know, started doing, you know, having some meetings or stuff on their own, and, you know, and people are very helpful to other people. And I've always found that that's, you know, I'm not surprised at that in the slightest, is that people who are really interested in something like to share it, and when you can explain it to somebody else, that's the best way of making sure that you understand it. So yeah, that's very important.
And then you also said that like the teacher, like the first role is to teach them how to learn a language. I was wondering how do you teach someone to learn a language?
Well, you know, way back in Korea when I was first teaching French, German, and Spanish as foreign languages, I used Assimil as the classroom textbook, and I taught them how to use it in a, you know, slower pace but fitted to a system the same way I use that to teach myself. So inevitably, if they were, you know, going to want to keep going on and want to do that, they could have learned how to do that very specifically by, you know, what we're doing right now. You know, for now going on 15 years, I've been making videos where I talk about the techniques that I found particularly helpful, shadowing and scriptorium and things like that, and trying to explain them and talk about them. Wrote my manuscript now that I've got that class called Pass the Polyglot, where I talk about different approaches and things to do with languages. I mean, the whole academy, that's all about, you know, trying to teach people to teach them. So yeah, well, what more can I do? I've had websites, I've had posted on forums, I've been to conferences, and I've got academy. I don't know. Tell me what more I could do to try to teach people how to teach themselves languages.
So is it sort of like they just have to try to learn one or a few languages, and then they feel it out themselves, and then if they have problems, you sort of just give tips or suggestions?
Well, I don't think you could teach in the abstract, you know, so this is what you do, you get a textbook and you work this, and, you know, I mean, yeah, you have to do it in the practice, but, you know, hopefully having been shown a good technique and, you know, having a good experience with that will bear fruit.
Yeah, we were talking about the 12-year learning sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, like, how does... Yeah, I don't know. Can you just talk about that? Or...
Okay, so I was just brainstorming, you know, and we have in the academy about a dozen or maybe a score of people who are doing 4, 5, 6 different language circles, classes, and they're doing it anyway. So I thought, you know, people like that, if we had a planned curriculum, if this was a place where people knew that, you know, you could come here and you could do that, just people know, what could you achieve if you were to say, I want to spend, you know, an hour a day. So 5 hours a week, an hour a day. If I were to do that over a, you know, period of time, 10, 12 years, what could I possibly expect to do? How would that look? And so I wrote that out. And it's very ambitious, you know, and it presupposes success, and it presupposes continued motivation and continued participation, and presupposes not some sort of terrible life crisis coming in, intervening and doing that, you know, and it presupposes that, more than anything else, it presupposes that you are a privileged person. You're on the top of Maslow's hierarchy, so you can devote an hour or two towards self-cultivation each day, and you have the means that this is something that you can budget and it's important to you in your life, and you can work with that. So if you're that kind of person and that's something that's important to you, and you'd say, I'd like to, know a handful of languages, as many languages as I can, and read literature. And then I looked at, what could be done on the sequence of outline of doing that. In particular, sort of following the steps that I did of branch learning for Germanic and Romance, because that's what I can lead and I think is the most accessible. I just sort of looked at a way that a person could start out learning as a native English speaker, learning French and German first, starting reading the great books in English, starting with a couple of, again, my class, The Path of the Polyglot, talking about the theory of language learning, some really important foundational linguistics courses like comparative historical linguistics and phonetics and field linguistics, how you write down a language that you're just hearing, you don't have any knowledge of it. Looked at just, building in experience, building in on something like that, and working on with greater experience and taking more time, and then building in what I myself do, cycles of getting through all the languages by reading a book in each language in turn, or maybe reading each language for a month at a time, sort of going on some sort of cycle. So integrating the learning of one language into the learning of other languages, using those texts, learning German first, and then learning, say, Swedish or Dutch using a German textbook. And at the same time, ultimately switching into reading the great books in not in English translations, but in, say, German and French translations. And so layering, so you're adding more languages, and then being able to have the entire branch and communicate, and ultimately add in an exotic language like Arabic or Sanskrit or Chinese, which is where the person would be, again, presuming somebody continued with that, as laying out a good challenge, with say a 10 or 12-year plan. Just looking at that seemed totally feasible.
I guess usually when people think of like language proficiency, they usually put like a native level as like the peak, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like in your mind, sort of really the peak of knowing a language is to know it across its historical development, as well as like the sister languages. So, like, why do you think that is important or rewarding?
To me, that's just sort of an integral part of what a language is, and not to know that, it's not that's integral and rewarding. You don't have the whole thing. I mean, look, there's a cat on my lap. He's a cat. I can't just know his ears. I've got to know the whole creature, and that's what it seems to me. If you're just talking about my proficiency, and my proficiency is nice, but it's only part, and I know that's my own quirk, and that's not applicable at all to most people, most learners. Yeah, it's all about proficiency and what you're able to do with a language, but that's not my sort of perspective or approach. Sort of trying to understand where a language fits in the context of its sort of organic growth, where it fits on the family tree that it fits, where it fits in the culture of the language, of the literature that it's expressed. So yeah, I mean, proficiency is great, but it's only part of knowing the language.
Are you enjoying these videos? Try subscribing to the Alexander Arguelles newsletter for more language learning content. Each month, receive musings from the professor's desk, hear student testimonials, and get book and video recommendations that will enhance your self-education. The link is in the description below. Please subscribe. You will not regret it.